Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Please sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com for weekly updates about my podcasts, events, and more. Also, follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and also at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. And finally, join my virtual book club called Zibby's Virtual Book Club, which meets every other Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time until 3 p.m. and features half an hour of book club discussion followed by 30 minutes of Q&A with the author whose book we've just discussed. You can sign up on my website, zibbyowens.com, under the virtual book club section, or even on Instagram under the link in my bio. I hope you'll find me in all these different channels and enjoy this podcast. I am so thrilled that audible.com is my new sponsor. They'll be sponsoring this whole week, and they're giving you all a free 30-day trial of Audible, which includes not only their audiobooks, which they're famous for, but also guided wellness now, podcasts, and so many Audible originals. You have to go check it out. I even have my special URL, which is audible.com/Zibby. How cool is that? So you have to go check it out so that they know that people who are listening are actually listening to this. audible.com/Zibby. And you can even text ZIBBY, all lowercase, Zibby, to 500-500 to get your free trial. So go do it now. I don't know about you. I love listening to audiobooks when I'm walking my new dogs, who are my former mother-in-laws, when I'm putting away the laundry and doing all that stuff. I love I Eat Men Like Air by Alice Berman. I listened to Where the Light Enters by Jill Biden to prepare for her episode, and Jamie Lee Curtis's Letters from Camp. Anyway, you should definitely go to Audible and go to audible.com/Zibby and get your free month of fantastic listening. Thank you. Arden Myrin is the author of the memoir Little Miss, Little Compton. She's an actress and comedian and became a new cast member on Showtime's Shameless Season 7. She recently appeared in the world premiere of Steve Martin's new play, Meteor Shower. As a comedian, Arden tours across the country and co-hosts a comedy show in Los Angeles called The Tinkle Twins at Meltdown Comics with Dana Gould. She appeared on Chelsea Lately over 100 times and is a regular panelist on At Midnight. She was a cast member of Mad TV for the final 4 seasons and is the host of the Nerdist podcast, Will You Accept This Rose, about the Bachelor and Bachelorette franchise. She's been in Orange is the New Black, Key and Peele, Inside Amy Schumer, Reno 911, Two Broke Girls, The Gilmore Girls, and many others, including films like Bachelorette, Wrong Cops, and Wrong. She can next be seen in the feature film Extracurricular Activities on season 2 of the CMT show Still the King, and she recently filmed a pilot for the CW called Insatiable, and a pilot for a talk show with Kate Walsh called Get in My Van for the Pop Network. I hope you enjoy our podcast. I sure did. Welcome to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Arden, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Zibby, I was so excited to be asked, so thank you. I'm a fan.
Oh my gosh. First of all, the care package you sent with us a while, it was like months ago now, and I was like, this is going to be so fun. Anybody who's like cool enough to put their worst middle school or lower school picture on a puzzle is my kind of, that's really awesome.
That was what I actually wanted for the cover. Like I tried to recreate, I did recreate my 6th grade photo, and I begged for them to put that on the cover, and they wouldn't. And you know what? I actually love the cover. Like I think I got the right cover, and I think they were right. But I was excited. I was like, well, I can't have recreated that and just have it go nowhere. So I was like, I'm going to do a Meet the Authors with me and my cat, Mittens.
It's perfect. I love how you got it in there. It was perfect. And also, when I watched you jumping up and down on Instagram and you were like, I wrote a book. I was literally like, I wanted to applaud. That was so cute. And you can just tell how proud you are. And you should be that proud. It's an amazing accomplishment.
I truly, for anybody out there who is an author or like a first time, so somebody who's never written a book or is writing, I have to tell you, I am so short attention span theater. The sheer fact that I've always been sort of in life, I could make magic in short periods of time, but I've never been like the long distance race. If I can't finish it in one sitting, I generally wouldn't do it. But I will say for anybody out there that's an author who, I had this fantasy that if you sold a book and you wrote a book that it had to, that people, that an author gets up and they have their breakfast and then they log in at 10 and they're done at 4 and then they go on a walk and then, have a brandy and watch, some classy thing on television. I really, particularly in the beginning, it was almost like, okay, you stay in your corner, I'll stay in mine page. Like the blank page was like, I was sort of cautiously approaching it like a caged animal. And I would, in the beginning, just do 25 minutes a day at first, but I would do it, I would time it and I wouldn't go online and I wouldn't, check my texts. I wouldn't be calling anybody. And it was just facing myself 25. And then eventually I could do a little bit longer, but if anybody who knows me, it is a huge accomplishment to actually just allow the process. Like, so I started with the word count. I mean, I had a pretty aggressively structured proposal, which gave me the format, but I was so overwhelmed. I started with the word count and I printed it all out and then I sort of organized everything. And then I just allowed for it to be a terrible first draft. Like I was going to Michael's Crafts and I was just getting glue and felt and yarn and sparkles and that just to trust that I had to just get the material. And then when I had all the words out, then I went through chapter by chapter and really made sure to tighten and shine each one up and then made sure the flow of the arc of the narrative made sense.
Wow. Well, it came off as like one really cohesive story. And the part that I found really interesting, I mean, it was all awesome. And your description of where you grew up and your dad, Willie, and, he was like right off the page. I feel like I got to know him so well. It's foibles and strengths and weaknesses and all the rest. But it's almost like how the book kind of developed unintentionally because you were talking about your life and then things like happened through the writing so that you could even say, and while I wanted to make this like a beach read, now it's serious and, but so poignant and moving. And I don't want to like give anything away that happens later, I guess, but your life.
I don't know. I'm not, so it does start out, it's an interesting thing. This was a book that I've been trying to sell for a while and I had this unusual upbringing and I had, and I think it's sort of like a small town life. My parents married on a dare. I had this sort of very salty dad who's almost like, he's a great literary character, maybe not so great in person as a dad, but like a great literary character. But I thought I could sort of tell this funny story. Yeah. And if you read it, there's a twist at the end that was not part of the original plan that I thought it would just be sort of like a fun, female comedian, funny. Here's all my most embarrassing stories. Here's my quirky upbringing. Here's my Dorothy going to Oz, like how I go from a town with a general store and make it onto a sitcom. Like, here's all that fun. And then an event happens on the day that I find out that I've sold the book that alters the entire DNA of it. And I actually think made it a better book.
I agree.
I mean, made life trickier. And I know that I know what's going on with you. I know what that's like, and, it's an interesting thing, I mean, we can talk. I don't know. What do you think? Is it giving stuff away?
I don't know. It's hard to say because it's your life. So I guess anybody who knows you would know what happened. But
I mean, so basically, here it's sort of this fun beach read for a while. It's this funny story. It's very fun, and I was talking about, in it, my dad had passed away and I was sort of writing about that. And it sort of got, it took me about a year, but I was feeling better. And then the proposal had been, getting shopped around. And I'm on the show Insatiable on Netflix, and we were back filming in Atlanta. And this is like 18 months after my dad had died. Nobody could get in touch with my mom. And she had just died making breakfast. She just died. And then I remember, so I had to go home, and on the way to the funeral in this tiny town, I got this email from a publisher that was like, hope you're having a great week. We're so excited to do this book with you. And, this has been something I've been trying to sell for a few years. And then, it was so strange that of all the versions of what the book could be, she was barely in the proposal because she wasn't quite as noisy of a figure. But what I really think it became her book. And then my friend who read it, she's like, Arden, it's not your memoir, it's your mommoir. And I think, I'm sure you're going through something similar, but like the experience of, when somebody dies, and when somebody dies who's sort of fun and beloved, like people tell you stories about them. And so all these stories were told to me that I didn't know. Like I didn't know that she was the den mother of my brother's Cub Scout troop. I didn't know that she'd made a flip book. Like, I grew up in this town with like fishermen and lobstermen. I mean, it's as small as you could possibly imagine. And she was like, okay, boys, like today I'm going to teach you how to put on a Broadway musical. And she made a flip book and like just things like that I would never have known. And so I think it really became sort of a fun tribute to all it takes is one person rooting for you. And that like I had this my parents married on a dare in Manhattan, and they never went on one date. They married on a dare for vacation time. And so it was just this odd upbringing. But if you just have a sort of, just takes one person who's like, protect your light, go for it, encouraging you.
Your mom was like I want to say like such a hoot. Do you know what I mean? Like
she was a hoot.
It was so funny, even like the clips that you put on from when she would call in and you would talk about her as a real estate agent. And I don't know, she just seemed like so funny, and you clearly had such a affection, not just affection like mother-daughter. I feel like it's such a general term, like, oh, my mother this, but
yeah,
it like doesn't do justice to like the crazy people these people are in the world. Do you know what I mean? She was like, quirky and funny. And then you build her up so much in the writing that when you get to the part with like the teacup on the counter, it's just, you want to just cry with you,
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Again, like you're one of the first people who've read it. And like, I've had a few friends who, are like comedy friends, and I'll get this, they'll tell you like, oh, haha, I'm reading, da-da-da, your dad is eating his sheet cake diet, blah, 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 and then I'll get a text that's like, oh my God, I'm in tears. Like, and I thought, okay, you know what, for me personally, I feel like, okay, that means like, I'm proud of that. Like, I'm not trying to make my friends cry, but that it could be, it's an interesting thing growing up in New England. You're sort of taught to not keep secrets, but for me, I grew up kind of keeping things funny. And then I actually will say it was my podcast, even my comedy. I was never super personal in my stand-up. And doing the podcast, I host this very silly Bachelor podcast. And I don't know if I don't know if you're having this experience now, but like both of my parents died in season. So it was like both of them died on Saturdays. The Bachelor airs on Mondays, and then I record on Tuesday. And I've always been fairly private about my personal life, but there was no way to hide that I wasn't in the studio and that I was like in my family den and I'm with my brother. And so I just made I allowed myself to cancel anything I wanted to cancel. And I wanted to do that. And I felt a real kinship with my listeners, and we chose to do the podcasts. And it was interesting. It actually became, I was worried I was going to freak people out, that it was going to be too much, that people are going to be frightened by that information, that they're like, lady, we just want our Bachelor news. We don't want to hear that your dad died and your family. Like, what are you doing? Are you a psychopath? And it actually, I felt people were like, thank you so much for talking about, what's going on. It helps me, I have stuff going on, or it helps me to see that you're still, moving forward. So I was pretty honest about my path there. And I think it allowed me on the page. I feel like each time, whatever you like, the universe or the creative spirits or whatever, I think are encouraging me to feel safer and safer, exposing more just of my heart or the truth. And it doesn't have to be malicious, but that by telling your story, like, it doesn't have to just be the funny parts, and that makes it a better story.
Yeah. You can still appreciate the funny parts, but it's almost like, I don't know, it's like looking at a very pretty tree, but you don't see the roots or something. Like once you can see the whole thing, then it's even more like majestic that it can rise. I don't know. It sounds ridiculous, but I don't know. There's something about seeing the whole thing. Seeing what maybe other people can't really see all the time. And then it makes it deeper, and then you enjoy the comedy more or something.
I mean, the people I appreciate are like sort of lay themselves out. And I don't know, it was an interesting thing, even just to, again, I think, I feel like the world is so bonkers. And even before 2020, I mean, like, it's like life is a journey, and I think just to know that everybody grew up with some stuff. Everybody has stuff. Even if it's it looks the best, or like everybody has a few cards in their hand that are complicated that was dealt to them. And I feel like just the humanity and the connection. And again, I kept trying to, I have a very close friend who's this wonderful playwright, Tom Diggs. He's like my classy friend. He was nominated for a Pulitzer. And I kept calling him as I was writing this. He has two things he kept saying to me, because I've, written scripts and things, but he kept saying to me, Arden, each piece reveals to you how it wants to be written, and that it's not the same strategy for each piece. And then he said, and then when I was debating, my dad was tough, and he was entertaining if he wasn't your dad. He was funny. Like, he was beloved by friends and like neighbors, but he was a tough dad. And I was asking him, I was like, I don't want to throw somebody under the bus. I don't want to throw somebody under the bus that's not here. Like, I don't want to tell he's like, and so he just kept encouraging me to be like, is it necessary? Check your motives. Why are you telling it? Is it your story? Like how much of can you reveal it? Sort of not to be Pollyanna, but like a lady. So you're sort of letting people know sort of what's going on without having to like throw somebody under the bus. And I felt like that was one of the things I'm proud of. I know my brother hasn't read it yet, so we'll see what he thinks.
Oh no. Okay.
I kept asking him if he wanted to read it. And he was like, and I said this, but the part that might be hard. I mean, I was, he was tricky. And Alaric, my brother, he's so sweet. And he was like, look, I know he was a tough dad. Like, so I just, I don't know. It's that balancing act of like, what's like, here's the real story. Here's the story.
You did include a nice, like, my brother's a great guy and he turned out great. I feel like you said something like that towards the end.
It's so funny about my brother too, because like I just love my brother, and did you grow up with boys? Did you?
I have a brother, yeah.
So like, to me, if you grow up with boys and like we wrestled, we were both equally horrible to one another. Like he was like, we were both tiny, no one was in danger. Like we were both the runts of the litter. So like, but that's sort of the fun of having a brother. But I remember like some of the people I think did not grow up with boys, and they were like, I think they thought that I had like this tough brother, and I'm thinking, no, that's just a brother, So I think I had to say, for any woman out there who didn't grow up with a brother, this is a very nice person who this is the 80s. In the 80s, like you're like little Peanuts characters, like just rolling around. That's the deal.
Totally. I feel like my brother used to like hit me all the time. And I remember telling this to my husband, and my husband's like, he was 3 years younger than you. What are you talking about? I'm like, I don't know. That's just what happened all the time. I don't know. We just like fought.
And it's kind of fun. Like there was some, like, who else on earth can you fight with?
Yeah. Well, of course, now when my kids fight, I'm like, stop. But anyway, when you talked about how your mom wanted 4 kids and he didn't want any kids, and they compromised it too, but your dad was like, okay, well, if you want to have kids, like that's your thing.
Yeah.
And then you said, so like my mom, my brother and I were like a threesome, and my dad was just like there, which paints the whole picture. It's like, okay, like he just didn't deal. It wasn't even personal. And yet, he was aware, and this is like what happened almost.
He would just say, like, from the time, he would just be like, I told your mother she wanted to have kids. She had to deal with you. And you're like, oh, okay. Like, it wasn't interesting. I mean, I don't know if it's also like dads of that era. Like, I didn't really know a lot of my friends' dads, but I will say I think mine was harsher about it, but it was just, if you don't grow up in a different house, you're like, okay, like that's a dad. Like that's, and thankfully my mom, my brother and I were such a team and we had so much fun, and it literally felt like the 3 musketeers, and then there was like a dude that lived in the den, and like that, and like, which was fine. You just sort of like didn't go into the den. I just hang out with my buddies, and that was sort of, and that was a very openly the deal.
Yeah. And then you even say, like, everybody gets dealt a different hand in life, and some people just aren't meant to love, or they just don't know how to love that well. And that part like made me so sad, because that just made me sad. That hurt.
I know. Me too. I mean, that was what was interesting when my dad died. I remember feeling, it's an interesting thing. And I actually feel like that's, look, I certainly didn't think my book would be coming out in a global pandemic. But I actually feel like it is a good book for this time in that I do think it's a fun, funny, lighthearted read, but I do think there's an honest, I feel like the world is kind of collectively grieving and there's some, and it's different. Like everybody has different experiences, but with him, it was sort of, I thought it would just be a relief because he'd been sick for so long. And it was the grief of failure to launch, of like, why did this, it never like, and I, there was never that come to Jesus at the end where like, I'm so sorry. It just didn't happen. And, I guess just wanting to tell anybody out there, look, I just speak for myself. Like, I am okay. I am okay. I am okay with, it doesn't mean that there's not hurt in the heart for that, but that it's okay. Like, there's other people in my life that love me and like, he just couldn't do it.
Right.
And then even with, with what happened with my mom this year, I know a lot of people are walking through all sorts of things right now that no one could have imagined. I mean, and the way it went with my mom, it was literally my worst nightmare and what I'd pictured. And I got to tell you, there was a weird grace to last year, even though my world was on fire. I would say there was certain gifts to it, which I write about in the book too, of like, one, I'm such a people pleaser. And like, I found that with both parents, one of the gifts of grief was I literally feel like I had no skin. And so the upshot of that was like, it was very clear to me, like who I wanted to be with, who I didn't want to be with, what activities sound like that. I still knew I needed to have a little fun, like what felt safe and fun and what was like, no freaking way, And I couldn't force myself to say yes when in the past, as such a people pleaser, I would have made myself or go, oh, I should do this, or I don't want to hurt their feelings. And it wasn't that I was rude about it, but that one of the gifts of it is I felt like it really separated like the shaft from, I don't know.
With the wheat from the chaff?
The wheat, yes. Like that it just became clear of like, what can I eliminate? And like, what makes my tail wag? What is joyful? What feels good? Like I really loved the grace of that. And like, you're very present. There's like time takes on a different quality, which I think is happening globally right now anyway. And that like, I just had to really slow down and listen to like next indicated action. Like, what do I need? And, I'm such a doer. I get things done. And it's like, how about half speed? How about just lowering the bar? How about your best is good enough and it may not be perfect and like done is better than great and maybe you're going to be late to your little gym class and maybe you didn't send that email, but like, okay, you're doing the best that you can. Like, and I think, I don't know, like there was some magic to that I wouldn't wish on somebody, but that if God forbid your world gets set on fire, I just that you'll be okay one day. This too shall pass. It won't always feel like this.
I feel like you've just been like dropped down to talk to me directly and then pretending like nobody else is even listening to this.
No.
So thank you. I was like, your book and Grief Island and like all the stuff you went through, it helps to hear someone else's story. And I'm sorry you had to go through it all. I mean, really, truly 100%, like from the bottom of my heart, sorry. It's just being able to share it and tell it and experience your own version of something you couldn't have imagined. It just somehow helps everyone else.
It really did. I mean, and it's so strange, but I really, again, this book was supposed to be a fun.
And not to say it's not funny.
By the way, it is very funny.
No, it's super
very
funny.
You know what? How about this? Stop. If you don't want to get to the sad part, stop after I go to England.
Literally, most of it is hilarious.
Yes, 85%.
Yes.
So, like, most of it is like it is the fun beach read, and then so just stop it after chapter 18, and then just skip the last two chapters. Yeah. but there's even hope in that. But I will say, like, again, growing up in this very sort of waspy New England family that doesn't talk about emotions and doesn't talk about feelings, I really felt, for whatever reason, the timing of the sale of this book, like, that this would never been my path in life, but like somehow normalizing grief of nobody talks about it, and that it's okay to feel sad and that you don't have to feel not sad right away. When people try to, I can't handle the she's in a better place. That one was the one I was like, I can't do that. Like, I can't do the better place one right now. Like, but that, that there's, for me, each one took about a year, and it was like, oh boy, here we go. It's almost, my friend likened it to getting strapped. You go to like Six Flags, and like when you go on those roller coasters that the things come down and lock you in, it's like, well, I didn't sign up for this ride, but it's taking me. So I think here I have some tips in the book of like how to kind of survive your own grief island, and maybe even have some joy in it, because there was some grace, I think, for me, the key was being around people where I could be not okay. And that actually made me feel more okay. That if they were not afraid that I was like, that it made me more, like Debbie Ryan, who wrote my foreword, the delightful star of Insatiable with me, and, the star of Jessie. And who would have ever thought that this wonderful 25-year-old Disney star would be the person that but she just showed up. And, we were in Atlanta filming, and she wasn't afraid of it. And we would go roller skating, and we'd go out for tacos, and we'd go to like the roller derby, and like we'd go do karaoke, and it was okay if I was a little bit out of it, I didn't have to be on point. And I think for so much of my life, I think particularly growing up in kind of a quirky household, trying to look normal or trying to fit in like everybody else. And there's such a grace of just being with people who are like, come as you are, girl. And like, put on your sweatpants, but here's some glitter roller skates. And we know you're not great, but come on, Annie. We're not scared of you. We're not scared of you in sweatpants. Come on. We love you anyway. Come on, honey.
It's so true. The people who end up coming through in times of loss, not coming through, but the people that you feel like the most connected to are never, I feel like not never, but are rarely the ones you expect. And it could be total strangers.
And sometimes the ones you expect can't handle it. Like that's, right. You don't know. But it's truly, it was all of the kids on Insatiable. It was the entire teen cast, there's a story, there was a boy on the show that was like this teen heartthrob who was absolutely adorable, Michael Provost. And I remember, and again, by the way, 90% of this book is not this, but
right. Yes.
Don't be afraid. But this boy, Michael Provost, one day he showed up at my Airbnb. He texted me. He was like, what are you doing today? And I was like, oh, I'm supposed to be writing my book. I'd said no to all these fun things. And he showed up at my doorstep, and this sweet teen dream had made me a lasagna. And I was like, he goes, look, I didn't know what to say to you. And I thought about it. And I remember when somebody in my town would pass, my mom would make them a lasagna. So I went on YouTube last night and I learned how, and I baked you a lasagna. He borrowed his mother's baking pan and he made me a lasagna, and he showed up. He was 21 years old, 88 million Instagram followers, truly he could have gone to a bar legally. He's super popular. And this young man went inside and baked his grieving adult lady co-star a lasagna and brought it over. It was just that people can be, there's so much goodness. There's so much goodness.
Yes. That's the best part. That's the best part of the whole thing, is seeing all the good and all the connection and all of that behind the scenes, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And you never know.
Behind the music of,
behind the music of teen dramas on Netflix. True story. True story.
Oh my gosh. Arden, I feel like I could talk to you all day. I feel like we're just scraping the surface, and I had so many quotes and all the rest from your book. But anyway, I loved talking to you. I love that you gave so much advice along the way of people, what they should do when they're writing a book and all of the rest, and your journey and loss and humor and how it all combines. And anyway, it's just a true pleasure to chat with you.
Oh my God. Thank you so much. Can I have a little giveaway for your listeners?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Okay. So I've partnered with that. There's a Premier Collectibles does a thing with authors. So you can get for the first 250 people, you can get a signed book and a Little Miss Little Compton tote bag for the cost of the book. If you go to ardenmyrinbook.com, ARDENMYRIN book.com. So for the first 250, you get the tote and the signed book. And then for the second 250, it's just the signed book. So get them while they last.
Well, I'm releasing this when your book comes out, so I'm worried that maybe they'll be gone by then. But hopefully,
then just go to your local bookstore and support an independent bookstore.
yeah, or maybe they'll still get it. We'll try.
We'll try.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Zibby, you are a delight, and you're so much service to so many authors and so many people. And I was so excited to come on your podcast, and I hope to meet you in person one day.
I hope to meet you in person one day soon.
Hi.
All right.
Hang in there. Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks again so much to Audible for being my sponsor. You can go to my site at audible.com/Zibby for your free trial month of Audible. You get all their audiobooks and podcasts and guided meditations and Audible originals and just so much. So go check it out, please, please, please. Audible.com/Zibby. Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.